लिखिए इसको, द प्लॉट ऑफ टॉम जोन्स इज इन इट्स यूनिटी एंड कंप्लीटनेस, in its unity and completeness is nearly as perfect, a plot as can be, fine. अब ध्यान से सुनिएगा मैं क्या कह रहा हूं. The plot of Tom Jones. So basically here this plot is a single whole and it grows quite organically. If I talk about Henry Fielding, he designed it in order to hold the mirror up to nature, and the vastness of his canvas tries to incorporate within its frame the variegated 18th century life in its different aspects. The action, though topical in appearance, has universal validity, and Fielding's main purpose or chief purpose in presenting this picture of human life was to exhibit the loveliness of virtue and the ugliness of vice, to inculcate the lesson that one's true interest lies in the pursuit of virtue and the avoidance of vice, and to give the warning that virtue needs to be guarded through discretion. Fielding is everywhere in perfect control of his narrative. The episodes of this novel are very well lit. Digressions समझते होंगे आप. The digressions are very few. The harmony between the plot and the character is almost perfect, and the entire movement of the novel is strictly governed by Fielding's philosophy of life and his moral vision. If I talk about Fielding's conduct, उसका जो conduct है, his conduct about this plot, he has done it with symmetry. The 18 books of Tom Jones can be divided into two extremely well-defined three parts, dealing successively with the countryside, the highways, and the life in London. Apart from this, you will also find that the two major digressions in the novel, the story of the man of the hill in book 8 and Mrs. Fitzpatrick's account in book 11, are symmetrically interpolated around the center. Besides, Fielding has used various other devices to achieve उसको क्या कहते हैं, structural unity. There are structural similarities. And what is that? Tom's rural entanglement with Molly is balanced by the urban involvement with Lady Bellaston. The scene in Molly's bedroom is paralleled in the scenes in Tom's bedroom in London. Now, Sophia's first encounter with Blifil is paralleled in Lord Felamar's interview with Sophia when he tries to rape her. And the first scene is repulsive and the second is horrifying so far as Sophia is concerned. But to the readers, both the scenes are essentially comic. You can also see that there are contrasted characters. Tom and Blifil, Squire Allworthy and Squire Western. So there are contrasted characters, Tom and Blifil, Squire Allworthy and Squire Western, Sophia and Molly, Sophia and Mrs. Fitzpatrick, Sophia and Lady Bellaston, Chatham and Squire, Tom and Nightingale. So the structural unity of the novel is also preserved through the repeated appearance of various objects as well as characters. The 100-pound bill Sophia had received from her father puts Tom on her track, and later it provides him with an excuse to visit her at the Lady Bellaston's. So these things happen, and I'm sure that those students who have read the novel can relate it well. Now, Tom Jones is often criticized for its two major digressions that have already been pointed out above, means just now. But though they do not further the narrative, they are not utterly irrelevant. The old recluse Tom, saves from being robbed in the book 8, helps to set off the nobility of Tom. Tom is treated by the world most unjustly, but he does not effect a cynical withdrawal from the society like the man of the hill. The other digression is even less objectionable. And what is that? The facts revealed by Mrs. Fitzpatrick do have some bearing on the story, since Mrs. Fitzpatrick is an integral part of the action. She, on the one hand, sets off Sophia's virtue, and on the other hand, they make her aware of the dangers of the misplaced attachment. And these digressions are quite in accordance with the epic conventions too. इसके साथ साथ इसके अलावा there are a few minor digressions also. Tom's encounter with the gypsies is neither very interesting nor of much service to the plan of the novel. Tom and Partridge's presence at Garrick's performance of Hamlet is perhaps intended to be a tribute to the histrionics of the great artist. Fielding also seems to have been swept away by the comic potentialities of the scene, and he leisurely dwells upon the comic of Partridge. Although Fielding does not violate the principles of probability or possibility, some of the coincidences introduced by him come precariously close to the improbable. And the sequence of arrivals and departures at the Upton Inn and Squire Western's timely rescue of his daughter almost appear to be contrived. And the huddled ending of the novel gives one feeling of crowdedness towards the end of the novel. Fielding himself was quite conscious of this, क्योंकि उन्होंने book 18 में he has addressed about these things a lot. Now, this was the question which I discussed in detail. Now, I'll also discuss the second question which I have taken, and that is, you can write it down if you want to. What is meant by examine the charge of immorality? Examine the charge of immorality against Tom Jones and state whether it can or cannot be sustained. So the students who read the novels properly can understand what you have to write about charge of immortality. So the charge of immorality against Tom Jones was originally stated by the Richardson and Dr. Johnson, the Puritan moralists of the 18th century. Richardson called Tom Jones a dissolute book. कैसे book? D-I-S-S-O-L-U-T-E. Richardson calls Tom Jones a dissolute book, a profligate performance. Dr. Johnson was even more uncharitable. And these views are neither endorsed by posterity nor accord with Fielding's own intention in writing this novel. In his dedication to Tom Jones, Fielding makes it eminently clear that he wrote the novel not merely to picture but also to edify. He was sure that his readers would find in the course of the novel nothing prejudicial to the cause of religion and virtue, nothing inconsistent with the strictest rules of decency, nor which can offend even the chastised eye in the perusal. So Richardson takes offense at Tom's being a bastard and the apparent leniency with which Fielding reacts to his sexual aberrations. Perhaps the Puritan in Richardson could not conceive of or tolerate a hero so easily susceptible to feminine coquetry. But Fielding approaches the whole problem from a very different angle. He does not condone Tom's moral lapses. He accepts his vulnerability as a natural human weakness and recommends tolerance, while he emphasizes the heat of discretion and vigilance to guard one virtue. इसके बाद बहुत सारे आप नॉवेल्स में से कुछ चीजें आप दे सकते हैं इसको बताने के लिए, जैसे Tom's involvement with Molly predates his love for Sophia. He succumbs to Mrs. Waters at a time when there is least hope of marrying Sophia. For he is not only a penniless bastard but has also lost the protection of a squire Allworthy. And in the case of Lady Bellaston, he is a victim of ruthless exploitation and deserves sympathy rather than censure. But once he gets entangled in these affairs, he conducts himself very fairly. He is never oblivious of his responsibility towards Molly and courageously, bravely confesses his guilt to Squire Allworthy. And when Lady Bellaston gets insufferable and Tom grows sick of the insatiable passion of his sex maniac, on the advice of his fellow lodger, Nightingale, he proposes to her and manages to secure a temporary release. So, this is what happens in the novel. You can write these examples as well and show about his immorality. Fine. Now, एक क्वेश्चन और है. Show that Tom Jones vividly reflects the contemporary English life. Reflects the contemporary English life. Show that Tom Jones vividly reflects the contemporary English life. We have to examine this. Now, here, एक बार क्या था, एक बार विलियम हैजलिट ने डिक्लेयर किया और जस्टिफाई भी किया that फील्डिंग की जो नॉवेल होती है, फील्डिंग्स नॉवेल्स, they throw more light on the 18th century society of England than the whole mass of statistical and historical documents. We can say that indeed the entire life in its panoramic expanse, taking in its sweep the countryside, the highways, and the urban society of London, is marvelously recreated in this epical work, Tom Jones. And in this respect, Fielding's work marks a definite advance over the literary writings of his predecessors who have been portraying the social life, but meagerly and in parts only. Even Henry Fielding, as a rule, eschews elaborate details of external appearance, yet by the graphic and suggestive touches, he provides a remarkably distinct and wild impression of the externalities of his age. Now, if I talk about the country life, though the country life is more conducive to the cultivation and preservation of virtue, yet Fielding does not present it as a pastoral ideal. It is a narrow world allowing to its inhabitants an intimate familiarity, capable of breeding various gossips. Here we meet the prude in Mrs. Deborah Wilkins, the shrew in Mrs. Patridge, the champion of women's in Mrs. Weston, the Amazon in Goody Brown, the coquette in Molly Seagrim, and the male world with the two young lads, that is Tom and Blifil, the two squires, Allworthy and Western, the two tutors, Squire and Thwackwam, and Patridge and Black George. To add spice to it, offers a colorful spectacle. The wealth, the splendor of the English countryside, Tom eats 3 pounds of roasted beef at a sitting in a Squire Western, and Parson supple share 4 bottles of wine, which is set beside the poverty and the squalor of the Seagrim's life. There is a good deal of vanity, There is a good deal of affectation, malice, and intrigue, destroying all the peace. Yet, in contrast with London, it definitely is presenting better soil for virtue to flourish in. So, this was all about the countryside. Now, we will discuss about the highways. The six books in the middle of the novel describe Tom's adventures on the highways leading to London. These highways were infested with robbers, with villains. It was very difficult for young women to travel along these lonely roads in the night. Tom rescues Mrs. Waters from Ensign Northerton, and the owner of the puppet show attempts an assault on Sophia's virtue. Two bandits try to rob the man of the hill of his belongings, and a highwayman threatens Tom at the point of his pistol to hand over to him all his valuables. The inns on the way harbor many rowdy and undesirable elements and present quite a noisy scene.